Token Metrics is a cryptocurrency investment platform that helps users leverage machine learning to become better crypto investors. Our in-depth analysis helps eliminate the emotions of investing, find profitable investment opportunities, and filters out scams. Learn more at tokenmetrics.com. Disclaimer: Token Metrics Media LLC does not provide individually tailored investment advice and does not take a subscriber's or anyone's personal circumstance into consideration when discussing investments, nor is it registered as an investment advisor or broker-dealer in any jurisdiction. Information contained herein is not an offer or solicitation to buy, hold, or sell any security. The Token Metrics team has advised and invested in many blockchain companies. A complete list of their advisory roles and current holdings can be viewed here at tokenmetrics.com/disclosures.
Being joined by Ryan Taylor, the CEO of Dash, which is a top 10 cryptocurrency based in market cap. And he'll give us updates on Dash and also give us an overview on Dash, where it began, where it currently is, and where it's going. Ryan, welcome to the show. How are you?
Doing well. Thank you very much for having me.
Nice, nice. All right, so let's start with the first thing. What is Dash? Can you kind of give us the overview for those people who maybe have heard of it but haven't really used Dash?
Yeah, so Dash is a digital currency, very similar to Bitcoin. And Dash is optimized for the payments use case. And what that means is very low transaction fees, highly scalable, and the transactions themselves are instant. They take about 1.8 seconds, about the same as a credit card authorization. And so we're really optimizing the technology for people to be able to use it as part of their daily lives.
Okay, so Dash is meant to be used kind of like, I think the name comes from digital cash, correct?
Correct, yes. So it's an amalgamation of those two words.
It's meant for fast transactions, not really having to wait for confirmation times like with other currencies like Bitcoin.
Exactly.
Now, Dash is a fork of Bitcoin?
Yes, it started as a fork of Litecoin, and due to the lack of development on the Litecoin fork, which is itself a fork of Bitcoin, we later pivoted and now are forked off of Bitcoin's code. And that allows us to take advantage of anything that's developed for Bitcoin that we think can have benefit to our users.
All right. So back to the use case. How is Dash different from all the other cryptocurrencies nowadays that are also going after the digital cash use case or even stablecoins?
Right. So Dash is different in a number of ways. First, Dash has some privacy features built in that help users to protect themselves, obfuscate from other users how much balance they have in their wallets. So if I transact with you, you can't necessarily see all that change coming back into my addresses and determine that I may have a lot of Dash. And so that can help with user safety. The second aspect, and probably the feature that people love the most, is the instant send feature. This allows a user to send a transaction, and the receiver can accept that transaction without any risk that those coins might be used for another purpose. That's called a double spend. Mm-hmm. And with Bitcoin and other cryptocurrencies, until that transaction is included in a block or even several blocks within the blockchain, it's really difficult for the recipient to have confidence that that transaction will go through. And so with Dash, that isn't a risk. Within about 2 seconds, the transaction is locked by the network, and essentially there's no risk to the recipient. And what that allows us to do is address a lot of use cases that other cryptocurrencies can't. For example, at the point of sale, where 96% of all transactions still take place today, you don't need to wait around for a transaction to go through. So if you're at a register, that's a use case that Dash can address. The third aspect is really low fees and high scalability. This is necessary if you're going to be used for transactions and facilitate a large number of them. Dash has really invested in infrastructure. We're one of the only cryptocurrencies that pays servers to operate the network, and they only get paid if they provide high quality service. And so as a result, the infrastructure itself is very robust, it's highly scalable, and that allows us to conduct millions of transactions a day without any restrictions. And by being scalable, that also keeps transaction fees very low. The reason Bitcoin transaction fees are so high is not because the cost of storing that data is high. It's because there's an artificial restriction on the number of transactions that can be serviced in a day due to a cap on their block size. And that basically creates competition for that limited available space. And that's what drives transaction fees higher. By making our network very scalable, we haven't run into that issue.
Now that brings me to my next question. So as mentioned, Bitcoin wasn't really designed for this use case of being digital cash. But now there's Bitcoin Cash, which kind of runs with Dash. So how does Dash differ? Is it mainly on the privacy and other features you mentioned, or are there other points?
Yeah, so the privacy feature is one. Bitcoin Cash doesn't actually have instant transactions. They have built some technology that helps make double spends harder, but they happen on that network. And so, it does make merchants potentially a target for fraud, the fact that double spends are still possible on their network. Mainly the difference with Bitcoin Cash from Bitcoin is scalability. They've basically taken a lot of those restrictions off or significantly increased them to make transactions cheaper and make it so that confirmations occur much more quickly. And those are improvements over Bitcoin for a payments use case. But what we've done is really optimize for that from the beginning. And that's why we've introduced these things like instant transactions.
Okay, that's great. Can you kind of talk more about the privacy part of Dash and how that's different from Monero and other privacy coins? Because it seems Dash doesn't really play up the privacy as much as flat out privacy coins.
Yes, so Dash was actually the first to introduce privacy features that were explicitly designed for privacy way back in 2014. And for that reason, Dash is kind of known for the privacy features. What Dash implemented is a technique called coin join. So we have the same transaction rule set as Bitcoin does. You can see all of the inputs, all of the outputs, and all of the amounts associated with each transaction. But what coin join does is it brings several parties together to combine their transactions into a single transaction. And that makes it a little more difficult to associate the inputs to the specific outputs for an individual. This technique has since been deployed with Bitcoin and Bitcoin Cash and a number of other cryptocurrencies. Dash's implementation of it is highly standardized. That makes its privacy a little bit better. But we haven't gone so far as to optimize for privacy the way that, say, Monero has. And the reason for that is very practical. Most people's privacy needs are quite basic. They're mainly to protect against your neighbor or your employer paying you in cryptocurrency and then spying on how you spend it, or what political donations you make, and those types of things. And the trade-offs for a very high level of privacy is limited capacity, slow user experience, difficulty using it on devices with limited capacity or limited bandwidth, like your phone. And those are trade-offs that most users are not willing to make. And so we're kind of introducing some privacy feature without optimizing for that and distorting the overall user experience. We want a good user experience first, and privacy is something that we've layered on. And so that's kind of the difference. And our privacy is also optional. So if you want to be transparent, you can be. There are many use cases for that. If you're running a nonprofit or something, you may want how those assets are being used to be auditable publicly in order to instill trust with your user base. And so we believe in giving people options for this. And we also believe that you don't want to sacrifice the user experience in order to make it happen. And so those are the main differences. So again, CoinJoin is a technique that any transparent blockchain can implement at the wallet level. And that is what we've done, is implement it at a wallet level to facilitate these transactions.
Okay. Now let's go back to the beginning. How was the idea for Dash born? How did you guys come up with the idea? And where are you currently right now?
Well, the founder, his name is Evan Duffield, and he had some ideas to improve Bitcoin, but was having a difficult time getting even access to the Bitcoin developers, let alone having a good opportunity to have his ideas fielded and seriously considered. It was kind of a good old boys club of developers that had been around since the beginning, and if you weren't in that group, it was very difficult to get access. And so in order to try his ideas, he decided to start his own currency and experiment with these ideas. And his first idea was focused on privacy. It was the first feature that was really rolled out. But in order to do that, he introduced a number of new technologies that are still a big part of the cryptocurrency space today. The first of which is the concept of masternodes. These are special nodes that operate within the network to perform differentiated tasks. And they're a layer of the network that's highly trusted to be widely owned. And the reason for that is, in order to operate one of these nodes, you have to prove ownership over 1,000 Dash. In this case, that's around $130,000 worth of cryptocurrency. Anyone is free to download the software and run it, and run a full copy of the nodes themselves, just like with Bitcoin. In order to upgrade that node to a master node, you have to prove ownership over 1,000 Dash. And what that enables, what that prevents, is any one person from controlling a large number of these. There's around 5,000 master nodes, and they're widely distributed. And that allows you to do things with those nodes that you couldn't do with nodes that are essentially free to start up and run, and anyone could control a large number of. And that is the base technology that everything else with Dash that's unique has been built upon.
Okay, now one could argue that whales would dominate the masternodes, meaning large investors would be the only ones who have access to running a masternode.
Well, it is true that the barriers to entry are quite high, with $130,000 required in order to start one. However, there are masternode hosting services that are available, and users can send coins to one of these operators to be collateralized into a node, and then receive a portion of the rewards for running one of these. And so at this point, they are highly diversified in terms of ownership. The largest, quote, whales within Dash's ecosystem don't control enough of the masternodes to, on their own, influence any decision within the network.
Now, are there any staking services that are vetted or approved by Dash, the company?
So to clarify, Dash isn't a company. In fact, Dash doesn't have a CEO. you introduced me at the beginning of the call as Dash's CEO. Dash is a decentralized organization. The network itself allocates the network's resources out to various organizations. And the organization that I lead is Dash Core Group. But we're one of many entities within the Dash network that receive funding from the network. We can talk more about how that happens. Yeah. And so Dash doesn't have a CEO, but there are many organizations like mine that serve the network. We happen to be a very important one because we develop the software, or most of the software that runs the ecosystem. And so to clarify, I'm CEO of Dash Core Group. But I'm sorry, what was the original question?
Oh, I was saying, are there any staking staking services?
Staking services that we endorse. We don't take a position on any of the staking services. We haven't evaluated them for, how robust their security is, for example. There are risks involved in staking with a third party. If you send your coins to someone else, obviously those private keys are not yours, and you're dependent on them sending your funds back when you request them. So there are risks. So there are several ways that people have pooled their money. They've done it with other users or family members that they trust and run one themselves. They've used it through one of these staking services that have been around for a while. And so, we've seen various approaches, but there are risks. One of the things we're discussing right now is whether to introduce into the protocol the ability to trustlessly do this same thing in order to better protect our users.
So as in custodial?
As in a protocol level change where you could designate your coins as locked away for a period of time and can be used to collateralize a node that someone else would run. In other words, you could participate without giving up control of your coins. And so we're considering whether to do that for user safety issues and other benefits that to the network.
Right. Now let's talk about your funding model, because I know it's one that's really been well received in the community. I know back in 2017, there was a lady, I'm not sure if she's still there, but she got funding from the Dash community to create a YouTube channel. Talk about Dash.
Oh, I think you're talking about Amanda Johnson.
Yes, yeah, Amanda Johnson.
Yes.
So can you kind of talk about the community's funding mechanism?
Yeah, so Dash was the first network to introduce what's called a DAO, a decentralized autonomous organization. And it's been operating since 2015 and has essentially functioned in much the same way that entire time. And the way that it works is that the masternodes vote as part of a proposal system. And the way that it works is anyone is free to put a proposal up to the Dash network. It has a fee of 5 Dash, but other than that requirement, anyone is free to submit a proposal. And the masternodes then vote on the available proposals on a monthly basis. And they can vote yes or no, or abstain from that vote. And it's very simple. We simply take the number of yes votes minus the number of no votes. That's called net votes. And the highest ranking proposals pay out as part of a monthly super block. And that super block just basically pays a large portion of the block reward all at one time. And so Dash was really the first coin to recognize that existing funding models were really broken. Bitcoin allocates 100% of block rewards and 100% of transaction fees all towards one purpose, and that's mining. But that's only one need for operating a network. You need developers, you need legal work to engage with regulators, you need all kinds of different skill sets, all contributing to the network to help it grow. And in the case of Bitcoin, that's a volunteer basis. They're relying on companies that integrate with Bitcoin to promote it. They're relying on developers to be funded somehow by the community. And as a result, there's not a lot of incentive for people to work on Bitcoin. In contrast, Dash splits its block reward. 45% goes towards miners, 45% goes towards masternodes for incentivizing people to operate that layer of the network and store full copies of the blockchain, and service users that are in need of fast transaction speeds, etc. And then the last 10% is set aside for this proposal system. And that goes towards anything else. That can be legal work, it can be marketing, it can be business development, it can be integrations, it can be any number of valuable activities that the network deems to be worth funding. And as a result, Dash really has hit above its weight in terms of gaining integrations, incentivizing users to sign up, providing for all kinds of different legal work that we've had to do to address regulatory concerns of exchanges, et cetera. And that really helps the network to grow very quickly. And so that's basically how this system works and how the network incentivizes all of these different entities. Now, this is where Dash Core Group gets its funding from, is by putting up proposals on a monthly basis to receive funding.
Now, that's paid out monthly, you said, or on every block confirmation?
It's paid out once a month. So the 10% is essentially all paid out as one of these super blocks that
at the end of each month, or some set date each month, whatever the proposal counts are. That's how it's a set
number of blocks, and it approximates 30 days. It's about 30.4 days or so. And so some months are 30 days, some months are 31. February is the oddball, but it works out to about once a month. And so there are 12 payouts every year.
Wow. So, I think that's definitely very innovative. And I have seen new cryptocurrencies like Energy and others kind of follow that same model. And I think they definitely take it from Dash or were inspired by Dash and how everything's been organized by Dash.
Yeah, I think it's healthier than a lot of the other models that we've seen. We've seen founders rewards where they just take 20% of every block, and that goes to the founder's address. The problem with that is there isn't a lot of accountability. If they aren't doing a good job, there's nothing the network can do about it. They may be wasting those funds. With our system, all the teams are highly accountable to the network on a monthly basis and can be defunded at any time. And it's much healthier, I think, than the donation model, because you've got the problem with that is you have a lot of coattail riders who won't donate anything but really want a lot of the larger holders to be donating towards initiatives that will benefit them. And so this ensures that everyone is kind of contributing together. We're all diluted a tiny little bit every month together in order to see all of these projects get funded. But we ultimately equally benefit from those things as the network grows, as new services come on to the network, and as our user base continues to expand.
Yeah, I think that's really fascinating. So what is Dash up to now?
Well, there's a lot of things happening right now. We over the last year, kind of the big events are that instant send became ubiquitous on the network. It used to be an optional feature. Now every transaction is locked, and by making it on every transaction, it really does improve the user experience. People don't need to think about whether or not they want to pay an extra fee for instant send. We did that by changing the way that those work and making them more secure with less resources, less compute resources necessary to make that happen. And so that's been a big change to the user experience. A second thing that we've done is we introduced a new technology called chain locks. Chain locks essentially do the same thing, but to a block in the blockchain. Dash is the only cryptocurrency that can't be 51% attacked. What that involves is if a particular miner gets the majority of the compute power on the network, they can actually change historical blocks and change transactions from the past. That's not possible on our network because every block that's published, the masternodes vote on those essentially in an automated fashion and reach consensus very quickly on what the correct block is for that particular block height. And as a result, Dash is far more secure. It's allowed us to get integrations into exchanges like Coinbase, where it's the fastest deposit method. They only require a couple of block confirmations before they credit your account and allow you to start trading. Whereas with Bitcoin, you have to wait 6 blocks, which can take an hour or even longer. And so it just provides a fundamentally better user experience. And all of that happens by default on the network at this point. We also just introduced onto one of our test nets a new technology called Dash Platform. This is our next major release. And Dash Platform is introducing new capabilities to the network in the form of data storage. Users will be able to do things like create a username, and then we'll be able to create applications that utilize data within the Dash network. The first one we're rolling out is called Dash Pay. And what that will allow you to do is have an experience very similar to Venmo, where I create a username, I can send you a friend request, Ian can accept that, and then now you and I are connected on the network. I can create a profile, I can store my shipping address, my email address, my phone number, and any other information I need to make purchases. And with that, I can have a really great user experience. So now instead of paying to a cryptographic address, I can just pay to a username. And when I see an incoming payment, I can see who it's from, which person in my contact list sent it to me. I also don't have to arrange for an address outside of the network itself. I don't have to email you an address and then call you to verify it to make sure it hasn't been altered by a hacker or something. And so it's much more secure, it's easier to use. And what it means for merchants is that I can add Dash as a checkout option, and the user, in this case, I might type in Ryan and hit enter, and it will actually notify my phone and say, hey, do you want to make this payment in this amount and send your shipping address, your phone number, and your email? And I just approve it, and all that information goes to the merchant through the network. So I don't have to type it in, and they can ship me my t-shirt or whatever I ordered. And so we're really focused on the payments use case and on making this very easy for people, orders of magnitude easier than other cryptocurrencies. And we believe that if you provide that type of an experience, that the growth rate would accelerate for our network. And so, yeah, you can imagine all kinds of other user experiences you could create, like an invoicing application that includes the PO number or an order number or bill of lading or whatever it is that you need to include, and have that information shared between the customer and the merchant. And so we're basically enabling anyone to build applications on the network. And we're doing it in a way where you don't have to do a smart contract. Smart contracts are great for certain use cases, but for most use cases, having the compute take place within the network is both expensive and slow. And it's simply overkill for most applications. And it also requires the developers to over-engineer it. There can't be mistakes once you launch that code because it's unstoppable. Whereas if you code something for an app on your phone and there's an error in it, you can roll out a new version. And so we think this is just a more practical way of providing these enhanced user capabilities than smart contracts are.
Okay, now, what is the main application or wallet for Dash?
Well, we have a number of wallets that Dash Core Group puts out. Those are available on our website at dash.org. And we link to a number of other wallets there as well. There's a lot of third-party wallets that are either dedicated to Dash or are multi-currency. So we link to, I think, the top 9 or so on each of the platforms: desktop, mobile, Android, and iOS.
So wallets all support Dash platform as you just kind of described, or would there be like?
So we will be rolling out the Dash Pay application that will feature those capabilities. Third parties will have the ability to integrate those features, but they will have to take that on as a project in order to do so. Dash Core Group is going to be putting out software development kits that make it easier for developers to integrate Dash Pay features and build applications of their own. But it really will be up to third parties, much like in Ethereum, it's up to developers to develop applications for that. And so it's our job to make it easy for those developers through these software development kits. We're deploying what's called a decentralized application. Well, it's a decentralized API. APIs are basically easy ways to interface between the network and an application. We're also rolling out kind of standards for these data contracts to enable them to take advantage of the data capabilities of the network. And so we're hoping to attract developers to the platform once it launches, so that we have a more robust set of applications that merchants or end users can use.
Okay, so let's now pivot to you. How did you get involved in cryptocurrencies, and how did you end up joining Dash or creating Dash Core?
Well, I have a long history with kind of financial services and fintech. I was with McKinsey's business technology office for about 7 years, became an associate partner there, and then left to join a hedge fund for 4 years where I was focused on the payment space. And it was when I was at the hedge fund that I first started hearing about Bitcoin. And about the third time I heard about it, I decided to look into it a little more heavily. This was back in 2012, 2013. And I instantly got hooked on it. I also instantly recognized its flaws as a payment technology. It was doing a lot of things, I would call it backwards, when it comes to user adoption, merchant adoption, that could be optimized. And so I started looking around for other projects. And in early 2014, I came across Dash, and it was really one of the first projects I saw that was doing anything significantly different. At the time, there were a lot of different forks of Bitcoin, but a lot of those were simply changing the consensus algorithm, or they were changing some of the parameters of the network, like the number of coins that would ever exist. But they weren't fundamentally different. And Dash was the first one I saw that seemed to be pursuing something that was fundamentally different on the user experience side. And it just so happened that I was moving to Arizona for personal reasons in the summer of 2014. And that is where the founder of Dash was, Evan Duffield. And when I found this out, I reached out to him and said, hey, would you like to meet up? And just started getting more and more involved in the project. Eventually, I left my job at a hedge fund to join this little scrappy volunteer group that was working on Dash. And we really focused on professionalizing it and turning it into a much more business-like environment. And so that's kind of my story on how I got involved.
Great story. So everything kind of came full circle, and now you're working on this company Dash Core. Now, what do you think is needed for cryptocurrencies to get wider adoption?
Well, I think the number one issue is the user experience. I think most of these protocols are developed by engineers who tend to think about the technology first and the user experience kind of at the end of the process. And I think it needs to have balance and go the other way as well. You need to also start with the user experience that you want to create and see what technologies are available in order to support that in as robust a way as possible. And so I think the way that Bitcoin was designed from the get-go kind of created a paradigm for the industry of how cryptocurrencies are supposed to work, and they're not particularly user-friendly. And that's the reason why Dash focuses so much on user experience and improving that. Whether that's from the speed of the transactions or security issues, all the way through to just being able to create a username and transact in a more normal way that we're accustomed to. A lot of the answers from the cryptocurrency community are, well, we need more user training. We need more education. And that can help, but I would argue that users shouldn't need an education in how your technology works. The best applications, the best new technologies that come out are ones that don't require a manual in order to use them. CDs were great. You popped them in and you hit the play button. And, it's the same with a lot of these technologies that do take off. Apple focuses on user experience, and look what happened when they introduced the iPod. They had 2 buttons on the whole thing. And so users really do want a seamless, easy experience, and crypto is anything but that right now. I think another aspect is there needs to be a lot more infrastructure put in place. I think we're starting to close a lot of those gaps now that will allow users to acquire it in a much easier way through their existing channels, like their brokerage account, or and that is beginning to happen at this point, where access is becoming much, much easier for a lot of users around the world.
Okay.
And so I think that aspect needs to be worked on. And then you've got this chicken and egg problem where merchants don't take it and consumers aren't accustomed to using it to make payments. And so, you really need to look towards other payment technologies that are rolled out and figure out how did they solve the chicken and egg problem, and see if we can mimic some of those things. I think as an industry, cryptocurrency doesn't understand those things well. It's not ingrained in the culture, and they want these things to happen, but I think there's very little understanding as to how they happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think I definitely agree with that. So my theory is, or rather my philosophy is, you need developers to build innovative technology, but you need marketers or people who are non-techies to cross the chasm and to adopt that technology. And I think that's what crypto is currently struggling with, because everything is from the perspective of a developer, which is great for early adopters, but to cross the chasm and reach a wider audience, you almost in a way have to kind of sell out, right? As they say, because the wider audience isn't really in tune with technology and they're not really early adopters. So we have to really make things very, very easy to use and have as little friction as possible. Now, I do want to get back to governance. So you talked about voting. How does voting work? Is it based on how much Dash you own?
Yeah, so the masternodes are the ones that each get a vote. And so in some respects, they kind of act like shareholders of the network. And they use those votes to vote on these proposals. Um, and as I said before, the highest ranking proposals pay out first. Now, there's a lot of different attempts at governance in cryptocurrency. You've got Decred and Tezos and a few that really try to differentiate themselves based on governance. In my view, governance is something you need to have to hold people accountable, but you don't want to go down the rabbit hole of having every decision made by the network itself. And so our decision-making process is very limited. It's where does the network's resources go? And so they basically approve or disapprove of allocating resources towards the various projects that serve the network, but they don't tell those projects how to go do what they're doing. They don't tell us necessarily what changes to make to the protocol. Experts work on that. We have product development people. We have quality control people. We have engineers that are developers. And these people all work together in order to enhance the product. But the network doesn't vote on which features they want next necessarily. It's our job to read those things from the community, to apply our expertise to the situation, to assess the amount of work that would be necessary in order to implement those things, and try to optimize our resources for where we can deliver the most value. And so it's been very effective at holding teams accountable for delivering value without micromanaging, which I don't think works well at scale. People have limited bandwidth to be able to vote on these proposals and get down into details and understand the nuances of decisions being made. And so we've really intentionally made it so that these are very basic decisions. We do have other governance mechanisms in place. In the case of Dash Core Group, we've issued 100% of the shares of the company to a trust, and the trust beneficiaries are the network itself. The trust protectors are elected by the network. So we're essentially network-controlled entity. And so not only can they change our funding by approving or disapproving of our resources that are going towards Dash Core Group, they can also alter the trust protectors if they want to fire me, for example. Without defunding us and causing that kind of disruption, they could elect trust protectors who say, Ryan's doing a bad job, and we're gonna get him out of there. And so we want this high degree of accountability to make this sustainable over a long period of time.
That's also the network. They also can vote on that.
Yes, the network masternodes essentially vote on who the trust protectors are. And so we've given up a lot of this power and control to the network in order to make sure that we're highly accountable. That also allows the network to build up a war chest in Dash Core Group. We can safely hold assets on behalf of the network because I can't run off with those. I can't shut down Dash Core Group and disappear with all the money. It belongs to a company who is controlled by the network. And so it really is a system that allows us to function a lot more like a business. A lot more.
Ever have any disputes in terms of the current governance model? Maybe if there's a indifference or a stalemate?
If there is a contentious issue, we have the ability to use the proposal system to resolve that. And one example of this is when Bitcoin was having scaling debates, and the network was debating whether, or the community was debating whether to have 1 megabyte or 2 megabyte blocks. And this actually caused the Bitcoin network to split in half over such a simple issue as the block size. And so we held a vote on our block size, should we expand it to 2 megabytes? And within 24 hours, there were a couple thousand votes on this issue, and it resolved it. Something like 99% of the network approved of the change. Mm-hmm. And then we went ahead and implemented that.
Now, what so you need to make a change? Is it 50% or more?
It's 10% net votes. And like I said before, it's yes votes minus no votes equals net votes. And so you have to have a supermajority of the network voting for something in order for it to pass. And so something that is roughly 50-50 split, yes or no, the net votes would be 0 because those two would wash out.
Right.
And so if there are 5,000 masternodes, you need to get 500 net votes. That means at least 10% of the network needs to vote in the first place, and a very high percentage of them need to vote yes. But once you have that data, it makes a lot of that contention just go away. The way that it works in many of these other cryptocurrencies is these debates take place on Reddit or on Twitter, and there's no way to measure where the majority of users want to go. It could be that you have a very vocal minority that makes it appear like one proposition is more popular than another. By making this an explicit vote, we can resolve contentious issues without splitting the network.
Okay, fascinating. Now, we do have some questions as well. We typically ask our guests on the show.
Sure.
So I think of this as kind of like a lightning round. So, first question, what are 3 books that have changed your life?
Oh, 3 books that changed my life. That's a big question. Well, I think professionally, The Trusted Advisor is a book that really is one that has allowed me to develop techniques and really focus on techniques that instill trust in business partners and business relationships. It is intended as a book for people who are in a professional services role, like consulting or as a lawyer or something like that, where you're playing an advisory role, but it really applies to any business relationship. It just so happens that those are probably the most critical trust-based relationships within business. From a personal standpoint, Letters to My Son is a rather obscure book, but my mother gave it to me when I was a teenager. And it covered a lot of issues that you go through as a young adult, and kind of gives a framework for thinking about all kinds of issues that you might face in your life, from love to whether or not to go to war in times of war, and just a crazy array of different family issues. And that one was really powerful as a young person to try and orient my thoughts around a number of different issues. And it was written in a very non-judgmental way where it doesn't pretend to know the answers to everything. A third book that changed my life, that is such a high bar. I'm not sure that I can come up with a third one right now. I've read a lot of different business books. I've read a lot of different personal books that have helped me with personal relationships. I would probably, for the third one, have to pick a personal relationship book that has helped me in my romantic life and one-on-one relationships and things of that nature. But I couldn't pin one down. I think there's little nuggets everywhere that I would have drawn from for that.
All right, let's go to the next question. Who are 3 people in history that inspire you or have changed your life, whether people you know or don't know?
People from history that have inspired my life. I think the obvious one is your parents. That's not interesting as an answer, but maybe the reasons why are more interesting.
Yeah, go ahead.
Is my father is very principled and would often do things that were against his own interests for the interests of others. He ran a number of companies and would out of his own pocket pay for legal expenses for his employees if they ran into some injustice. And I don't know many people that would do that. I kind of apply that same way of thinking in my own life, where I'm currently going through an injustice that I can't speak about quite yet, but hopefully we'll be able to in the future. And it's relevant for cryptocurrency. And I had two paths: the easy, cheap way, or the way that would benefit other people. And I chose the more expensive, difficult path in order to deal with that. And my mother more for caring and interpersonal reasons and lessons that I learned from her. And you know, I feel really fortunate. My entire family were people that I really could look up to. A lot of people grew up in situations that weren't good for them, weren't healthy for them, or they even need to separate from their family in order to reach a healthy place. And I was just very fortunate growing up. Another person was my stepfather, who, you know, for all of his faults, did introduce me very young to the world of finance and helped me to learn the basic principles of it. And I became very interested in it as a teenager. And my life would have been on a completely different trajectory if it weren't for that. So those are kind of the pieces that I would look to. I think you can name historical figures, but if they're not there for you day after day, you know, they don't truly have the same level of influence as the people that are part of your life on a day-to-day basis. And so I don't think I could ever name a historical figure.
All right, that's great. Okay, last question. What are 3 actions you took that have changed the trajectory of your life?
Well, the first is when I was in college, I had signed up for electrical engineering because I was good at math and everybody told me that I should. And I didn't really enjoy it. I think that I came to the realization after 2 years of college that I should be doing something that I enjoy. I really enjoyed my economics classes. I really enjoyed business classes. I did not like electrical engineering. And I finally made the decision that it doesn't matter that I'm good at this stuff. I really need to focus on something that I'm passionate about. And so I made that switch, and I never looked back. I've always had an interest in technology, and I can keep that interest while focusing on something else. That was realization number 1, and a big decision that I made. The second was probably making the decision to go back for grad school. I got into Columbia University for business school, and a lot of people in my life were telling me, go, it's incredibly expensive, you're going to incur a lot of debt, you're going to miss out on income and career advancement and those types of things. And I said, this feels right for me. I appreciate all of the advice, but I ignored it all. And I went with my gut and did what I thought was right for my career. Turned out wonderfully. I would be in a lot of trouble if I didn't name getting married. That one's the obvious one. So I'm going to go with a fourth one here too. And that is that I think making the decision to make the plunge into cryptocurrency was another fork in the road, where I had a great career at a hedge fund. Obviously that's a well-paying job, and everyone was telling me that I was absolutely insane to go work for Dash at a time when I think the payroll was $750 or something per month to go work at this tiny startup community. And I really saw a lot of potential in it, and took the plunge at a time when that was a crazy thing to do. 2016 was not a year that a lot of people were taking that plunge. And so I'm really glad that I did. this has been the most impassioned job I've ever had in my life. It feels good to go to work every day.
Wow, that's great. That's great. And great stories. Any last words before we wrap up the show? How can people find you, learn more about you and Dash Core?
Well, the best place to learn about Dash is to start at dash.org. There's links to all kinds of information, whether you're a developer or you're a user or interested in the concept of the masternodes. There's also links to all of our community groups there. There's Discord chats and Telegram groups and all kinds of, choose your communication channel, and there's all kinds of ways to interact with the community there. For me, probably the best thing to do is to follow me on Twitter, which is rtaylor05. That's my Twitter handle. And so you can follow me. The Dash Twitter is DashPay. And that's a great place to just keep current with the project.
All right, thank you. Well, it was a pleasure talking to you, Ryan. Great interview. And to our entire audience, as we always like to end the show, the moon is not the limit, to the moon and beyond. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you.
Since the creation of the internet, every industry has been turned upside down. Amazon changed retail. Uber changed transportation. YouTube changed video forever. With the invention of crypto, money is next. At the speed technology is growing, the future of money and securities are digital. 9 out of 10 millennials do not trust banks. The value of money relies on trust. Government debt is higher than it's ever been before. Central banks continue to print money. Fortunately, the world has a new solution. Experts predict in 7 years, 10% of the world's economy will be in crypto-based assets. Today, 1 billion people have access to the financial industry. Crypto is about empowering the other 6 billion people by banking the unbanked. Do not underestimate this. Do you wish you invested in Google, Amazon, or Netflix before anyone ever knew about them? $1,000 invested in Netflix turned to over $500,000. At Token Metrics, we help you find the next Netflix. Token Metrics users think differently about investing. They are early adopters looking for financial freedom. They are people who see a better world. A world without international borders. We believe in a world where everyone has access to the next financial revolution. At Token Metrics, we are creating a bridge that gets you to that revolution. We will help you make sound investments in this new world. The world's best investors do not rely on their intuition. They embrace technology and AI to invest. Token Metrics uses AI to find invisible patterns in data to help you invest and trade in crypto. In the past, we have used our data-driven system to achieve financial freedom. Now, we are giving you the keys. We created Token Metrics to be the only platform you'll ever need to make money in crypto. We give you AI and access to crypto experts at the best price. The moon is not the limit. To the moon and beyond.
Disclaimer. Token Metrics Media LLC does not provide individually tailored investment advice and does not take a subscriber's or anyone's personal circumstance into consideration when discussing investments. nor is it registered as an investment advisor or broker-dealer in any jurisdiction. Information contained herein is not an offer or solicitation to buy, hold, or sell any security. The Token Metrics team has advised and invested in many blockchain companies. A complete list of their advisory roles and current holdings can be viewed here at tokenmetrics.com/disclosures.